Next week's going to be fascinating because the Republican National Convention kicks off in Milwaukee. We'll be broadcasting live from the RNC beginning Monday, and we'll be there all next week. So tune in. We'll find out who Trump's vice presidential running mate is going to be, and there'll be, I'm sure, a lot of drama in Milwaukee. Never any drama for this guy, one of my favorites, Arthur Aidala, New York trial attorney, well known in the legal field. He's our legal eagle. And, he hosts the Arthur Aidala Power Hour on AM 970, The Answer, from 6 to 7 p.m. every Monday through Friday. I understand last week when I was on the cruise, you had the Alaska cruise, you had a little bit of fun at my expense, Counselor.
I don't know. Did I? I mean, Mike, I always have fun at your expense because you're a fun guy. I actually like the commercials where you're shooting a Bernie gun there or whatever it's called. I mean, you look really scary. I mean, I was afraid. I mean, I was like, wow, if I see Mike Gallagher coming at me like that, I'm going to run for the hills.
Listen, the way you New Yorkers are with guns, every New Yorker ought to have a Byrna because finally they can have a way to defend themselves because you can't defend yourself with a gun in New York.
I actually looked it up. I think you actually can carry a concealed burner phone in New York City. I looked it up during the commercial break.
All 50 states. I mean, no background checks required because, again, it's non-lethal. It emits this projectile that kind of and when it hits the bad guy, pepper spray and tear gas, and it kind of neutralizes them. Arthur, the reason I wanted to talk to you today, and this is so important, and it's good to catch up to you, buddy, after being gone for a few weeks, and we've been kind of out of sync. With all the political drama, we must not forget the legal challenges that President Trump still faces. Can you bring us up to date on the appeals process that Trump is now embarking on? Because, hey, the Supreme Court suggesting he has degrees of immunity. What does that mean for the New York prosecution or the New York case against him?
So it would have meant nothing for the trial court in New York had President Trump already been sentenced, which that was supposed to happen yesterday.
Right.
But what happened was between the conviction date and the sentencing date, the Supreme Court of the United States came down with this ruling. So Trump's New York City case is still alive, and you could file motions up until the actual sentencing. So yesterday, his team filed motions basically telling the trial judge, Merchant, hey, you need to look at this ruling by the Supreme Court of the United States of America because we think that Trump is, at the best case scenario, immune for any prosecution. But even in the scenario most favorable to the prosecutor, there was testimony that was allowed into the trial that the jurors were able to hear against President Trump that should not have been allowed in according to this ruling. And specifically, people are focusing on the testimony of Hope Hicks, which the prosecution relied on heavily. They spoke about it heavily in their summation. And a lot of the things that she spoke about were conversations she had with President Trump as opposed to candidate Trump or President-elect Trump. So the trial judge is going to be, he's got a lot to consider. The prosecution now will retort. And my guess is they're going to say, Judge, there was so much other evidence besides Hope Hicks. Even if you took her testimony out of it, he would still have been convicted. And therefore, we call that harmless error. And the conviction should still stand. And Mike, just to be clear, every judge after a verdict bends over backwards to make sure that verdict stands. And in this case, Judge Merchant is going to bend over backwards 3 times to do everything he can under the law to make sure this verdict stands.
Look, it's hard to ignore the fact that he is literally a Joe Biden donor. No way around that. And so it's impossible to kind of extract that from any belief that he could be fair and objective. And if people didn't think Merchant was fair or impartial during the trial, I think you're right. What expectation can we have that he'll be fair now?
Yeah, and it's also, look, this is the biggest case of his career. It's the biggest case by far of the Manhattan District Attorney's career. And, even though judges are supposed to be impartial, let's face it, they sit in the same exact building as the prosecutors. And that's why so many judges lean in that direction. They will say, the prosecution will say this case should have nothing to do with the Supreme Court case should have nothing to do with the trial case because it didn't exist. This law is a new law. It didn't exist at the time of trial. And therefore, at the time of trial, That's the law that exists. This will go to an appeals court, the appellate division, first department here in New York, and they'll be able to take a fresh look at it, and they will have the power to say, well, we read this decision from the Supreme Court. They're the bosses of all of us, and they're saying that at the very least, a lot of this testimony shouldn't come in, and there should be a new trial.
Let's hope and pray that happens. Follow Arthur on X at Arthur Aidala, Aidala. When you're in a pinch, he's the guy you turn to, the one and only Arthur Aidala. We'll see you next week from Milwaukee, my friend. Keep fighting the good fight.
Thank you, Mike. God bless.